Hey, my name's Paul, and welcome to this episode in our Glimpses of Jesus series. We're taking a journey through the Old Testament. Our plan is to stop off at the main events, examine them, and see how they point us to Jesus and salvation in him. We're in the book of 1 Samuel. Saul's the king of Israel, and in 1 Samuel 14, we meet his son, Jonathan. He's a man of faith that God uses to save the nation. In 2015, Colour Sergeant Joshua Leakey received the Victoria Cross. That's the highest award for bravery that can be given in the British Army. On August the 22nd, 2013, he was part of a support unit for a routine patrol in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The main patrol came under attack. Leakey saw the danger, led his section into the middle of the fight, evacuated a wounded US captain, and manned the machine guns. These were actions that turned the tide of the battle. The report states, Leakey's actions single-handedly regained the initiative and prevented considerable loss of life. These are brave actions, filled with courage. The same is true of Jonathan in 1 Samuel 14. Jonathan and his armour-bearer take on the Philistine army single-handed. Bravery and courage in abundance. But where does it come from? The answer? Faith in God. This is a chapter that puts faith on display, and faith matters as we follow God. The call to be a Christian is a call to trust Jesus, to put our faith in him each day. So what can we learn here about living by faith? Well, first, we see that living by faith means seeing things with a God perspective. Israel's been overrun by the Philistines. The situation's dire. 1 Samuel chapter 13 and verse 22. On the day of battle, not a sword or spear could be found in the hand of any of the troops who were with Saul and Jonathan. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had weapons. Can you feel the hopelessness in those words? No weapons. That means they're helpless. Where's Saul? Well, he's hiding out near Gibeah with about 600 men. He's got the priest of God with him. But there's no plan and there's no prayer. What are they doing to fix the problem? The silence is heavy and telling. It's as if Saul's given up. The problem's too big and that's all he can see. But then there's Jonathan. Chapter 14 and verse 1 tells us. That same day Saul's son Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." Jonathan leaves the safety of the camp and sets out towards a garrison of Philistine soldiers. That's crazy, right? Why does Jonathan do this? Why does he put himself in danger? The answer's in verse 6. Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will help us." Nothing can keep the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Here's the point. Jonathan's eyes are not fixed on the problem in front of him. They're fixed on God. His vision is captivated not by the number of soldiers, but by the Lord, who is more than able to handle a few measly Philistines. That's what faith does. Maybe you find yourself in a place where you borrowed money and you can't pay it back. Or you're trapped in the downward spiral of a difficult relationship. Life presses in and you feel helpless. Faith recognizes the problem, but also sees God. A God who cares and a God who can do the impossible. And that changes the perspective. Or is there a particular sin in your life that you're struggling to get a grip of? Anger or impatience? Lying or gossiping? Lust? You're trying but can't beat it and you're ready to give up. Faith recognizes the issue but focuses on God. A God who's defeated the power of sin through Christ at the cross. A God who's with you by his Spirit. Suddenly the issue looks different. What about evangelism? You feel fear at the thought of talking to someone about Jesus. What will they say? How will they respond? You can't open your mouth. Faith looks at God. A God who can give you the words to say and protect you from all harm. And this makes a massive difference. Looking at God drastically alters our perspective. So how do we do it? First, we need to fuel our minds and hearts with the truth of God. Listen to biblical preaching. Read the Bible. Get to grips with the truth of God lived out in people's lives. And then we need to bring those things to mind. I may have the knowledge, but if it lies dormant, then I end up lost in a world where it's just me and an insurmountable problem. It's as we remember the truths of God that our vision gets filled with His power, His grace, His glory. We need to consciously remember God. We need others to press us to look at Him. We need to pray that the Holy Spirit will wake these glorious truths up in our mind and transform our vision. Living by faith means seeing things with a God perspective. What else? Living by faith means taking action. Chapter 14 and verse 6. Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will help us." Nothing can keep the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Here's the expression of Jonathan's faith. He knows God can help and save. He trusts God, and that faith leads to action. But notice, this isn't presumptuous action. The word perhaps is important. Jonathan is not claiming a victory. He knows God can, but without a specific promise, he isn't saying that God will. That's a significant distinction. In the Bible, God does give us specific promises. If we believe in Jesus, God promises to forgive us. He promises to be with His people always. Yet there are many areas where God shows us He can do things, but He hasn't promised that He will. Healing, specific outcomes from ministry, release from dangerous situations. We need to be careful about naming and claiming promises God has not made. Faith is not proved by how much we claim in prayer, but by a firm belief in the bigness of God and a trust and openness that however He works, it's the right way. Jonathan's actions aren't presumptuous, but they are risky. Look again at verse 6. Jonathan said to the attendant who carried his weapons, "Come on, let's cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised men." This isn't just a call to leave the camp and the relative safety of numbers. It's a call to walk directly towards the enemy forces. The risk is amplified in verse 11. They let themselves be seen by the Philistine army. And the Philistines said, "Look, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they've been hiding." Jonathan's not hiding in the long grass. He's in full view. This is risky. Think of a parachute jumper in a plane. How do you know they trust their parachute? Well, they jump. Faith isn't faith if it's not prepared to take risks. Jonathan's faith leads to action, not presumptuous action, but it's risky action. And it's also committed action. Verse 10. But if they say, "Come on up," then we'll go up, because the Lord has handed them over to us. That will be our sign. And Jonathan is prepared to follow this through to the end. Verses 12 to 13. The men of the garrison called to Jonathan and his armor-bearer. "Come on up, and we'll teach you a lesson," they said. "Follow me," Jonathan told his armor-bearer, "for the Lord has handed them over to Israel." Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet, with his armor-bearer behind him. Jonathan cut them down, and his armor-bearer followed and finished them off. Jonathan's faith isn't just words, it's action. That's important. True, the action might look different in various situations. For Jonathan, it meant stepping out. For George Muller, a pastor in Bristol in the 1800s, it meant waiting. One morning there was no food for the 300 children in the orphanage he'd set up. Muller prayed and waited. Later there was a knock at the door. The baker with some bread he'd been prompted to bake for the orphanage. Another knock. It was the milkman with a cart of milk. Faith might mean standing up and speaking. It might mean getting involved in a ministry that you feel overwhelmed to. It might mean saying no to a career opportunity because it will prevent you from being an active part of the church. It might mean moving house to be involved in a church plant. You pray, the doors open, so you go, trusting God will be with you and bless you. Here's the point. Faith in God never leads to nothing. It always leads to action. As it says in James 2 and verse 18, "But someone will say, 'You have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without works, and I will show you faith by my works.'" Living by faith means seeing things with a God perspective, and it leads to action. One more thing. Living by faith means letting God call the shots. We see this as we look at the foolishness of Saul. Here's verses 23 and 24. "So the Lord saved Israel that day. The battle extended beyond Beth-aven, and the men of Israel were worn out that day. For Saul had placed the troops under an oath. 'The man who eats food before evening, before I have taken vengeance on my enemies, is cursed.' So none of the troops tasted any food." Israel are saved. The battle's won. But not everything is as it should be. The Israelites are worn out. Why? Because Saul made an oath that prevented them from eating food. Where does this oath come from? The passage is clear. It's not from God. It's from Saul. Why? Well, we're not told, but it seems to be a pretension at religious devotion. It sounds devout, but it isn't. Actually, it's a foolish oath. Jonathan finds honey and eats it. His energy is renewed. He offers it to others, but they won't take it because of the oath. Here's Jonathan's reply. "My father has brought trouble to the land. Just look at how I have renewed energy, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the troops had eaten freely today from the plunder they took from their enemies. Then the slaughter of the Philistines would have been much greater." His point makes sense. If you're cutting down a tree, don't saw off the branch you're sitting on. That's what Saul does here. And it gets worse. At the end of the day, Saul's oath almost leads to Jonathan's execution. Verse 44. "Saul declared to him, 'May God punish me and do so severely if you do not die, Jonathan.' Jonathan looks to God to lead him. Saul doesn't. Instead, he sweeps in with the impression of faith, the big sign of devotion. But it's not from God, and almost leads to the hero being killed. When we live by faith, we're content to let God call the shots. We're happy to be guided by the principles set out in the Bible. We give time to searching and understanding God's ways. And we're concerned to walk in them because we believe they're good and right. Is that how I live my life? Is that how you live your life? Are we seeking his direction in the big decisions of life? Promotions, marriage, university, large purchases like homes or cars? Are we seeking it in the day-to-day? How we act, how we live, the priorities and patterns that we have? Are you living by faith? I love how Jonathan's armor-bearer responds when Jonathan calls him to stand at his side against the Philistines. It's in verse 7. "Do what is in your heart. Go ahead. I'm completely with you." Are you in that place with Jesus? Are you ready to give yourself to him and follow wherever he'll lead? Trust in him with a faith that sees things with a God perspective, a faith that leads to action, and a faith that lets God call the shots.